I think what a lot of companies do is they say, okay, we want to get out of Excel, but they don't really update their processes. So they use yesterday's processes to win for tomorrow. Another good place to look at is your waterfall, because anywhere that you have big drops, where does it happen? It's not just whether it's discounts or rebates. It could be a particular region. It could be a sales rep. Finding out why that's happening, that helps you build a relationship with your counterparts. Your ROI could be hundreds of percent, 300, 400, 500%. I've even heard of, into 4 digits, but really focus on what you can deliver.
Hello, Chad. Welcome to the Price Talks podcast. Good to have you here. Good to see you again. We, of course, have met before at EPP. Can you do a quick round of introduction for yourself?
Sure, Chad Crowell, and you probably noticed by the accent, I'm from north of Chicago, and I've been in pricing for a little bit over 10 years. I started my career in IT, and I did that for about 20 years, working with companies like Accenture and Dow Chemical, et cetera. I really liked the numbers, the ROI, the cash flow analyses, the project estimates. And so I went out and got a master's in finance. And then my first opportunity in pricing came with an implementation, systems implementations. And then as soon as Caterpillar found out that I knew the system, I knew German, worked in Germany, they brought me on board as a senior pricing manager to do some of their strategic projects. And then it kind of went from there, and did some consulting and worked as a pricing lead as well.
Nice. I do have to say it's an interesting journey. So you have legit seen all the sides of it, from a system integrator, consultancy, till actually at the organization side of things. So in a long career that you already have, we'll come across those things that you're like, oops, shouldn't have done that, or not gonna do that again. So what is one of those typical mistakes or things you came across that you would say, nope, be careful, do not make the same mistakes as I did?
One thing did happen when I was from the Chicago time zone supporting Germany on one of the big product lines. It was about 10 years ago, and I was giving them really good service. I was starting work at 6 a.m, making sure we didn't have a big time difference. Everything was going really well. And then once I was doing a price roll for the end of the year, and the person who was dealing with their system in pricing, he was out long-term sick, and IT was doing an SAP implementation, so they had no time for me. So after about 5 or 6 weeks, I finally got the data, and it wasn't like SQL where you just pull the data out. This was kind of a crazy native thing, and it all came out wrong. So, the decimal separator, between whether it's a dot or whether it's comma, was all messed up. So 10,000 kilograms turned into 10, and costs, prices, and I'm kind of a can-do person. I was like, okay, I'm going to get this done. And I did it for like a half a day trying to fix all this stuff. And it's like, okay. And then come Tuesday, more stuff. So it's another couple hours. And then 2 days later, more stuff. So it turns into a cockroach problem, right? And it kept on going. And then 2 weeks later, I found more stuff. And at that time, I really should have just said, I'll cut the loss, and I'll go back to last year's data. And at least it's reliable. So the 2nd of January comes around, 3rd of January, and then a couple of questions come back. Oh, hey, can you check on this? And another one came like 2 days later. I was like, oh no, I didn't get all the cockroaches. They're coming out of a bottomless pit. And so like 3 weeks later in the mail chain, there was something like, oh, this has got to stop. And I thought, oh, wow. So it was a tough one, but we got through it.
It's a good thing you got through it, but I think we all agree data by itself, if the data set is wrong, it's going to be a tremendously challenged to get everything sorted. It's better to go to a more reliable data source. I would say in the beginning, it's not easy to push back on, go back to the last years of data, because you want to show yourself and want to show that you're capable of doing it, right? So I understand. And if we then go into a second question, because this is, of course, something that happened on a personal level, but you have seen multiple organizations as well. From a business perspective, also from a consulting perspective, what are some of the mistakes you have seen companies make?
I think the biggest thing is your North Star, creating a 5-year journey. Where do you want to be in 5 years with your pricing strategy, your processes, the organization and the systems and the tools? Where do you want to be? And then chopping that up into 6 and 12-month sections and then working on that. I think what a lot of companies do is they say, okay, we want to get out of Excel, but they don't really update their processes. So they use yesterday's processes to win for tomorrow. And it's really important, even if you're not changing your strategy, that you really have the processes that set you up for success. And that's what you put in the system.
Yeah. I agree. That's the best way of putting it together. If you then bring it all together into like a personal learning in what shaped your pricing experience right now, are there some defining moments in your career that you feel like, this is where it made sense. This is where I could connect the dots.
I think really connecting the dots um, is working with those who are not part of your team, working with the third party, working with sales, because sales once is often incented by revenue and pricing is usually incented on margin. And they're not always pointing in the same direction. But I think one of the biggest challenges, and also what's really most rewarding, is developing that relationship with the sales director or the VP and just asking them, hey, how can I help you? Okay. I think when I started, I was kind of like, oh, well, we have to change A, B, and C. It's like, well, how can I help you be more successful? Okay. Is it your discounts and your rebates? Is it your price structure?
Yeah,
That
it's really about getting that one part there, right? That really can assist them, that you get your first win, that you can celebrate with them, and then you can extend it.
exactly, and putting myself in their shoes. And they're a real key part of the process because they're the ones who execute the prices when they're doing deals. So how much of a price drop from your list are they giving to the customers for the deal? And they're the ones that we need to say partners. And I think everybody has a story or two about working with sales.
Yeah, I fully agree. We can make all different podcasts about that, but just the war stories. Just another question to piggyback a bit on your experience. What kind of advice would you give to a B2B organization that's taking their first steps right now in trying to become more mature in pricing? What would be your advice for a pricing manager in such an organization?
Yeah, linking to the 5-year journey, understanding where you are, making the first assessment of how mature or how maybe chaotic are your processes. EPP, European Pricing Platform, little plug here. They have a great template to assess all the different parts of your pricing, and that really helps you get the start. It helps you get to the 5-year plan. And another thing that you need to look at is that your pricing needs to mirror the business.
Yeah.
It needs to mirror your business model and how you go to market. And if you're really looking at volume with your customers, then you may want to think about having rebates at the end of the year as
Mhm.
opposed to front end discounts where they don't have to buy. So it's very important to understand how we go to market. What are we really trying to achieve? And then the pricing just kind of comes from that. Or I make it sound too simple.
Because I think it's great advice. And by the way, we will post the EPP template underneath here. So for everybody where you're watching, we'll put the resources underneath here so you can do your scan yourself. But what I do want you say as well, and I think this is a very interesting part, is it needs to align with your business. Pricing needs to align with your business. But there are so many pricing managers I know that are struggling in because they are caught between everything within the organization, right? So they have sales, they're trying to close the deals, they have finance, and the margin is under pressure. And we need to gain market share. No, we need to gain more margin. What would be the first steps be for a pricing specialist, for a pricing manager in that level? What would you say with your experience? What would be the first steps to take in that situation to shed some light at the end of the tunnel?
I think that when you're looking at what you want to do over the next 3 to 6 months, that you need to do sort of a mix. The first thing that you want is quick hits,
Hmm.
something that's easy to do that gets quick turnaround that you can easily measure and show management. And that money that you're generating can fund your projects, can fund your journey. And alongside of that, So in addition to these small quick hit projects, you're going to want to do some improvements. Maybe you need to put in some controls to make sure that people aren't giving huge discounts or, whatever's needed.
Yeah.
But you need to do both of those at the same time so that you don't get to the point where the management says, okay, it's been 8 months. How much have you brought the organization? What have you done for me today?
Yeah.
So that was a week ago. What are you doing for me now? So I think that is really important to make sure you're mixing improvements with actual actionable quick hits.
Yeah, I think that's a very good tip. And then if we bring that back, because everybody, of course, wants to work in a 5 year plan, being able to first sketch out that 5 year plan, make a whole action point out of it. But we all know you do not get the time in order to get that all solved, right? Because right now, end of year pricing happening, new budgets, we need to increase prices. How are we going to do that? Okay. So I think that's the day-to-day life every pricing manager has to deal with. So if you have to give one concrete example, for example, in your previous businesses, what was one thing that you came in and you were like, okay, this is something I'm going to address? Because rebates is not something that's it's not something I think I would start with at the beginning. So are there some points where you would say, have a look at just a few of these topics, because this is where you can make, I know it's a bit generic, but you can make some quick improvements usually.
Sure. Maybe two different places. One would be if you're doing a quick study or a quick analysis on a product family, um, you're going to find issues. Okay. And if you reprice that, if you get that set up well, that should generate some quick money. I did that on some value-based pricing for a couple of different families, and it restarted sales in two different cases. So it was a very quick turnaround. Another good place to look at is your waterfall, right? Because anywhere that you have big drops, maybe something to look at. And where does it happen? It's not just whether it's discounts or rebates. It could be a particular region. It could be a sales rep. It could be lots of different things in a particular product group. Finding out why that's happening, that helps you build a relationship with your counterparts,
Yeah.
marketing, sales, etc. And because you found something that can be improved or that is causing a big problem.
Yeah, no, good. I fully agree with that, and I think the waterfall, for example, is brilliant, right? Just to already show where is my margin going, right? So what's happening from my price till the pocket price in the end is a great overview to help clarify a lot of these things. If you look at the current market, I think a lot happening in the world right now. What would you say if I ask you to name three main challenges you would see across B2B organizations right now?
I think when you're dealing with manufacturers, that what's very important is to have a holistic approach between the OEM machine side and the aftermarket.
Yeah.
Okay, because your machines are going to be most of your revenue in general, most industries, but the aftermarket is going to be most of your margin. And you want to make sure that both groups are working together on the pricing, and that, you need to make sure you get the machines out into the field, and so that you can sell parts over, whatever the lifetime is, 10, 20 years. And that is really important. So it could be that you may not be making much margin on a particular machine, but if they're going to be a loyal customer and be buying your parts and service or signing a service contract, that's a lot of future money adding into your ROI and your NPV.
Yeah, good. So from your experience, it's the margin gain versus the selling of the machines, of course, and aftermarket. How were you balancing those? Was it difficult to be competitive on the machine side of things? You're trying to push the volume over there and get the margin from the aftermarket. How did you balance that?
It Sometimes it's on a case to case basis. Sometimes it depends upon where you are in the business cycle. But if you're looking at it holistically, then you're looking at, what's your total return on investment? What's the total NPV that you're generating for the machine and the parts and sales? And that can that leads to a combined decision, which may not be the same decision if they're working separately. Okay. So am I cash flow positive? Am I making X percent on this? And what does the entire deal look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so really keep having that holistic approach to see the full chain and not separately in the parts. Okay. Makes sense. That's good. I know one of the things you're a big fan of is value selling, right? So what's your value proposition? Where do you add the value, and how can you monetize that? Of course. Do you have any tips for pricing managers? Because it's a hot topic. Everybody wants to do value based pricing, but how do you get that ball rolling, right? How do you start those conversations, and how do you quantify that value that you're adding?
Yeah, part of that depends upon where you are in the value chain. Okay. So if I'm building machines or I'm selling parts to dealers or to distributors, the real question there is what value are the partners bringing? Okay. And so are they only distributing parts or are they providing parts and service, building the customer relationship? Those are two very different value propositions. And also that comes right back into your pricing. So your dealer net is going to be lower than your distributor net because your dealers are adding much more margin. And that's a very good way to analyze, understand there could be different distributors adding different levels of value, and they're all going to want as much of the margin as possible. But really having an objective analysis of, you know, how much distributors usually bring and which ones bring the most, who really collaborates with me. That also comes back into price administration
Yeah.
because if you're doing more deals and you have more conditions, they may get triggered at some point in the process with the customer and the sales. So that can also bring more complexity into your pricing administration and also your analytics of how well did those deals go? Or what is my margin in general?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I fully agree, and I think actually, I think this is a very good bridge. So thank you for already starting that one. If we talk about the price administration, right? There is a multitude of ways of doing it, and I think most people, except the pricing specialists, still prefer to use Excel to get most of these things in line and play around with it. What I'm kind of interested in, and I have a conversation with you about as well, is you've seen so many system integrations across the globe and across countries. What are the points you actually should take into consideration if you do a system integration, right? So how do you start? So currently, you're a customer, you're an organization, and you're struggling with price execution, price administration. It's getting out of hand. Can you talk me through it? How is your approach with that from step to step?
Sure. If you're working in an Excel and 99% of your job is in Excel and 1% is in SAP, that's a lot of time. There's a lot, it becomes error prone and it's difficult to see a million of anything. And so Excel can fall over. We used to break Excel all the time, a couple times a week. And the price administration, it's not only very complex, but it also takes so much of your time and your energy that that's one of the big benefits when you put in a system to really enable your pricing. But the first thing to do is to get the money, build the business case, your ROI, return on investment. That's your percent return each year on the and for the project. That can be rather high because if you're putting in X, whatever, a couple hundred thousand into the project, whatever that number is, you can be adding millions to your revenue just by improving your price in the multiple different areas. So your ROI can be several 100%, which is not typical in other types of projects. And of course, the NPV, the net present value, how much are you actually bringing in new money to the business?
Yeah, and may I ask you, Chad, because what I think is interesting to have a discussion about, or zoom in a bit about, is, do you think, because if you're talking about the return on investment, and a return on investment is of course setting better prices, generating higher revenue, and generating more margin. But you have seen it as well. One of the main advantages I see as well is time saving, standardization, less prone to errors, automation, being more agile. Were you able with your organizations and previous projects to quantify that amount as well into the business case? Or if you built the business case, it was really focused on revenue, margin, market share, those KPIs?
That's a really good question because when you put your business case to management or the C-suite, they've seen a lot of business cases. They've probably seen hundreds of business cases filled with sunshine. And, is the ROI actually there? Use your own data. If you're giving too many rebates, or you're giving too many discounts, or whatever the issues are. Use your own data to calculate, if I changed it for these core customers or for this key sales region, that's an exact number. And that brings a lot more credibility to management. And then you just extrapolate that. It's like, okay, if I took 5% here and across the rest of the sales, it's like 3%, those are exact numbers. Okay. Because one of the key questions management is going to ask you is, so where did you get these numbers from? How do you know it's 3%? Have you done a couple of things in the past? And if it comes from your data, that really makes it more believable, because when they see the ROI, you got 30 seconds to start selling them, right? And so that's the key thing that I would say.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that, and I think, and I can vouch for that as well. What I've seen is that's when most successes are booked, because indeed, what you say, it's trusted because it's your own data, and also find somebody, or if you have your credibility yourself, I think find somebody that is capable of doing that, right? To bring that message across.
And one more thing on the back end, you're going to want to measure this. You're going to want to have KPIs in the system that measure your ability and what you actually have in results. So when you come back every quarter or 6 months or whatever the frequency is, you're going to say, remember, this is what we told you. This is how we're executing it on this data, and always bringing them back in the reviews of, these were the goals, and this is what's actually happening. That provides a lot more credibility for ongoing projects.
Yeah, I agree. That's good. And I think then we're touching, I think, already on a very interesting next topic, which I wanted to discuss with you about, because we can have the eternal discussion: do I need to build my own solution, or do I need to buy a solution? Both have their advantages and their disadvantages. I would say I'm not the objective one here, so I will let you talk about this on what you have seen coming across, and what your experience says about this.
Yeah, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of build, internal software departments, building your system or massive enhancements on your ERP system. But when you buy, you're buying all of the experience from the previous customers. The best practices are already built in there. So you can really take advantage of that. And every quarter, when your vendor comes out, they're going to have new improvements on that standard functionality. If you build it, if you have it programmed, you get exactly what you ask for. But are you always on top of all of the best practices? That all has to be programmed for you. Of course, everybody has one or two customizations. That's completely normal, maybe even 10%. But what you really want to do is find a way to buy in general. And ask yourself this question: are we really that different from our competition and from similar industry sectors? I think in a lot of aftermarket sales and service, there's enough similarities typically to buy. And if you're going to build, how much experience and skills do you have to put into your software department in order to maintain it?
Yeah.
Or how much of the new functionality that comes out in the standard system do you have to have programmed into yours? So I think since about Y2K, you really want to buy if you can.
Yeah. No, yeah. So of course I'm as I said, right, I'm not fully objective in this, but I've seen organizations doing both. And I agree with you. Both of those actually will ask a lot of input from whoever is in the organization, right? IT will be involved anyways. If you talk about an integration from a tool, you need to have the functionality, you need to still have the pricing capabilities within the team. You need to have executive sponsorship, right? And I think the biggest advantage from buying instead of developing on that side is indeed what you say. You can use the success stories from the other customers, or in your scenario, the competitors that are your industry that are making use of the tool already. You get access to that information, or actually those functionalities and features as well, which would really help you, I think, in those next steps. So I think that's so. We've built a business case. Let's say we've made the decision to either build or buy. What would be the next step?
Well, then you get to ask who can do this. You send out the RFQ, the request for quote, and excuse me, it's very important to ask W questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how, and be very specific. When I do an RFQ, I have 3 versions and I do it over 1 to 2 weeks, because you really want to make sure that they're giving you the exact answer that you're looking for. If you ask, do you have discounts or do you have regional pricing? If you get a yes, that doesn't tell you anything. And so you want to make sure that you go through several versions, that you really find that your questions are very pointed so that you get the answer that you really need. Another thing is systems are going to have functionality, and that functionality may work, but you also have to ask, how well does it support your processes? Okay. So if it has functionality, it could be all over the place for you, or it could be very easy to use. So do you have to go to several different tabs or parts of the system to run your process? Or is it very easy to use, like good usability, so that it marches you right through the process to get to your results? So another thing is companies want to tell you that they're always doing configuration. Ask them what that means. Ask them if they're setting parameters. If they're saying you could do A, B, or C, just tell us how to set up. That's more configuration. If they say, tell us what to do and we'll go out and program it or we'll write functions, then you're back to the build.
Yeah. I think this is a very good distinction you're making here, because then you're still configuring and building your own solution within that pricing tool, which still happens a lot. And yet again, could be beneficial if that's what you're exactly looking for. But then again, it makes scalability a whole lot more difficult in the near future, right? But I agree. I think specifically on the RFQ, I think have the right questions. Make sure they align with your actual goal, what you want to achieve by purchasing a pricing solution. So that could be all different kind of things, and are all different kinds of vendors and suppliers out there. But indeed, ask the questions and ask more specifically even how, why, and when. Because are there discounts in the system? Are there rebates in the system? Don't tell you anything except you get a yes with, but you don't tell you how to use it. So that's a very, very good one. So let's say we've done the RFQ. You get 10, 15 responses. How would you say, what would your next approach be? Select 3 or 5 and then have the interviews and start the conversations with them? Or is there a different approach?
If you rank your requirements, say from the best or the most important from, 1 down to 5,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that the answers from the RFQ are answering that question for you. You want to get down to 3 to 5 vendors in order to get to the second round of the selection.
Yes, good one.
So when you're down to 3 to 5, then these are the vendors that can really support my process and they can work with the IT department, because you have functional requirements, technical requirements, data requirements, volume requirements. And so that all fits together, and your functional requirements are not just only coming from pricing, but they could be coming from sales as well. And also marketing, et cetera, maybe even groups like product development engineering. So then you have the group that you want to do the closer selection process on. And that's where you want to see the demos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So then you start demoing, and then you have all your stakeholders there, even sales and marketing, if they have their input, to see if they can get out of the system what they want to get out of it. Right. And then, yeah.
And you give them scenarios that you want to see. Okay. I want to do these types of spare parts, and I have my A, B, and C parts, or these particular types of families, so they can really show it that would really mirror your business. Okay. And those should also have similar data. You can change some of the data, but similar data to your calculations for the business case, because if they support that, that's going to bring in the money.
Yeah. And then you can also actually evenly check all of them on where the differences are and where they excel at each other if they have the same data set, etc. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing to pay attention to is there's a mantra: a sales rep's going to sell.
Yeah, true.
And so when they say, oh, you can be live in 3 to 4 weeks, it's like, really? Okay. So you want to, usually something's configured within, say, 2 to 3 months, but you still have to go into the detailed requirements and the design, et cetera. Now, the product will probably be configured within 2 to 3 months, but your critical path, especially in your first project, that's your data interfaces. Okay. And that kind of gets into working with your IT or IS department. But to design, build, and test your interfaces is going to be 6 months. So what does that mean when a sales rep says you can be live in 3 to 4 weeks or even 6, right? So now if you're on release 2
Yeah.
and you have all of your product and your customer data and all of your sales and your invoices, if all that stuff's in there, then yeah, maybe it's a bolt on to what you already have in the system, but we're still on release 1,
Yeah.
right? We're still figuring out which system's going to be the best one.
Yeah. And would you agree as well? Is that so? It's one thing from the vendor side, of course, but also I would say I would highly recommend check internally with your IT team as well, because there's a lot of data connections that would need to be there, and you would need to be able to provide in the data format of that specific vendor you're chosen for the data. I have seen happening a lot of times that everybody was like, "Yes, we're going to align," and then internally the capabilities or the resources were not there as well. And then the whole project gets delayed, which is a bummer for everybody. I see you nodding, so I assume you have seen this before as well.
Yeah, there can be a couple of interesting stories. I think the key thing is just like when you're partnering with sales, you want to partner with your IT department. And in the budgeting process, that you work together with the IT director or the VP so that they not only budget the money for their part of the project, you're still running the project. It may come entirely out of your budget, but we're going to have to do some sort of CapEx. They're going to have to do a design, build, and test with the software, maybe architecture as well. And so getting them to plan in October and November, for them to plan what part of next year that they're going to do your project, that really smooths it out. Because the last thing that you want to hear as a project manager is, we can't do your project for 3 months.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think one of the biggest challenges in the end, right? To get everybody aligned and on board and scheduled on that side. So that's a very good one as well. Chad, if we then summarize it all up and bring it back together, right? I feel like I can break it down in a few steps. So one would be start with the business case. So we have the return on investment. Make sure that you can present it to your senior management. Then you need to make a decision. Do you want to build or buy? Both have their advantages and their disadvantages. Then you start the RFQ process, right? So finding out those vendors and see what are the capabilities are. After that, you go into your internal software department where you have to make sure that everybody is aligned, there's time, there's schedule, there's budget, that your internal data can be delivered. Then I would say you need to scope it, right? So what's the first release? When are we going to get the first benefits, right? Then you need to go into a bit more the further requirements for the 2 and the phase 3. Then you need to look at your data interface. I think, as you correctly said, it's one of the key things which everybody in the organization is going to interact with. It's most important, I would say, from adoption perspective as well, to get people on board, right? If they can't work with the interfaces, they won't use it. I would say to everybody, do not underestimate the power or the stubbornness of somebody that has worked for 10 or 15 years with Excel, because they will keep doing that no matter what. So everybody is resistant to change. So you have to make it easy for them, and therefore quick wins, I would say, and the interfaces. And then I think last but not least, the most important one is testing it, right? Is your business case there?
Yeah, for your first release, you want to try to get it in pretty quickly. Okay. 6 months, maybe 9, but you want to get it in quickly. You want to get to the benefits, and you want to make sure that you're having a quick turnaround on those improvements. Be it improvement in price, processes, being able to see everything at once.
Yeah.
Can you see a million things? Can you pull it up at a chart in 2 seconds versus trying to do it in Excel over a couple of hours or weeks? This is going to be a big improvement. Now, if you got pretty good data, when you load the database, your test database, you may find a couple of things that you want to change in your pricing. So you may be able to collect some benefits to do some improvements as long as you trust that data in the test system.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a caveat, but it is a possibility if you see your data and you trust it.
Yeah. And I think a question to you where I think a lot of people are struggling with is, today we talk about AI and all the possibilities, and people get overwhelmed sometimes, I think, if they look at systems and the capabilities that are there, right? So, and then they want either everything all at once, but the data needs to be in order. We need to take steps, right? So in your approach, in your experience, would you say start small, make sure that's good, and then extend? Or would you say take a bigger chunk of a system, of a tool, make sure that it works well, but you already can cover a full industry or a full country or anything with that, right? So would you say start small and then expand, or already start bigger and try to do the big impact all at once?
Cliff events aren't that popular anymore because they can cause a lot of business disruption, especially you're going to have a couple of bugs still in the system, right? Or somewhere in the whole solution. So you want to put something in that's concrete, that will deliver your first chunk of benefits, and you want to time box it because your requirements may eventually change for release 2 and 3. The business may change, that's not going to stand still. So you want to get something in, and you at some point you'll get the processes in the system in. The key thing that really gets you to your success is the change management, the human change management. So you want to make sure that your people are involved. So your sales director is involved, and one of their best cheerleaders, one of the good sales managers is involved. They're shaping the requirements, they're testing the system, and they become the trainers or the trainers of the trainers. So keeping them involved from the beginning, making sure you're time boxing it to, try to put in 6 months, but you want to deliver value because everybody's going to be waiting for this.
Yeah.
The C-suite heard about it and said, yeah, you can have the money. And then, the proof's in the pudding. So you want to make sure that it has impact. You don't want to try to do everything at once because
Mhm.
then at some point you don't really get done. I've heard some projects being, like 18 months, like, wow, for a first project,
That's long.
it's a
That's too long.
long
Yeah.
time to wait for benefits, and you have to start defending yourself.
Yeah, not true. Maybe this is good, I think, to take into for everybody to understand. We're talking about return on investment. We're talking about business cases. Can you give us some numbers of things you have seen in your career, like return on investment on pricing projects? What have you seen? Are we talking about 20%, 30%, 50%, 100%, 120%, 300%? What is something? What could be the potential impact in an organization?
Yeah, let's just do a real quick numbers example. I'll pull some numbers out of the air. Let's just say your project costs 200,000. If you can improve prices the first year by 500, your payback is less than a year. You get your original investment back. And then the following year, if you did 500K the first year, or let's just say the first 12 months that you're in production,
Yeah.
because that's when you can really make the price improvements. Then in the second 12 months that you're in production, that could be 1 or 2 million. It could be more depending upon, how many sales you have, what's your volume, where are you doing the impact, also your margin.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a low margin business, just increasing 50 basis points on your margin, that's a lot. Your ROI could be hundreds of percent, 3, 4, 500%. I've even heard of, into 4 digits, but um, really focus on what you can deliver, what makes sense, and, internally do stretch targets and do maybe you want, say, a lower level so that you can always meet it with management in case you hit a downturn or something.
Yeah, good. That's a very good tip as well. Chad, may I first of all thank you very much for being here in the podcast and the conversations we have. For everybody that's listening right now, and I think this is an important one as well. I think we already talked about system integrator getting things inside the business, but for everybody listening, if they when can they reach out to you? What can you offer them for services?
Well, if you're looking into a system selection, if you're changing your pricing structures, if you want to really improve your business by using a system, I've kind of spent my whole career almost in systems and implementing. As soon as a company finds out that I've implemented systems before, it's like, oh gosh, we need to do that too. So that's kind of the key thing, and helping you along to really hit the benefits, hit your timeline, make sure the right people are involved from the front end. That's a great place for me to come in.
Thank you very much for that, Chad, and hopefully we talk to each other soon again.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's very nice of you to invited me to the podcast.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye bye.